going to share with you one of my favorite stories. But before that, I do have a few points to make. And I wanted to share a quote by a woman named Sarah Kay. And what she says is that there's nothing more beautiful than the way the ocean refuses to stop kissing the shoreline, no matter how many times it's sent away. And I just feel like that's such a beautiful idea or image that the ocean is not keeping score. And how could that be measured anyhow? You know? So when children are asked, and when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about Mia Sarah and her relationship with her grandchild. When children are asked by their mother or their grandmother, how much do you love me? They reach their hands to the skies and they say this much. And they say this much because they know something that we tend to forget is that the real stuff can't be measured in inches and days and points. Like the untouched terrain of our inner worlds, there's pockets of our lives that have an eternal and an infinite aspect to them. I imagine this is the way Kathy Richardson or Tombre feels when she's singing. Like this is just a wellspring that continues to flow, and that these good and beautiful things flow from us without measure. And when that happens, there's no way to keep score. So these are the things that go unmeasured because they can't be measured, but nevertheless, they are actually usually the things that need to be protected and honored and nurtured and valued, because these unmeasurable resources are usually the first to go to be evacuated when fear or lack or limitation step into the room. So the first question that I have for you today is, what do you do without keeping score? Where are the deep wells that you could get lost in for the sole purpose of feeling joy or self-expression or purpose or connection, and where you know that no matter how many hours you give to this thing or this relationship, you still feel that you got the better end of the deal? Where are you not keeping score? I started to play pickleball the other day, and I came to find that the hardest part of the game is actually keeping track of the score. It's super, super important. If you play pickleball, you know this. I didn't know this. They do it also in pickleball, they do it in a really weird way or an odd way or a different way where like every time you call out the score, it's like a re-evaluation of numbers, and depending on who's calling the score is how you call out the score. Super complicated. And I thought to myself, I'm never going to learn how to keep score in pickleball, and I don't really care. But then my coach told me, if you don't say the score before you serve, you lose a point for not saying the score in the correct way. And it got me thinking, how much power we give to points. And I didn't want to tell my coach, but I didn't really sign up for pickleball to win at pickleball. Like that was not even in the scope of what I was thinking. And I was thinking, even when he told me this, that I was going to lose points, I was thinking, well, who cares? What kind of trophy are you going to get for pickleball? And of course, my mind went there. I could only assume like a pickle and some balls, and that's not something I want on my mantle. So enough said. But I may be in the minority because I have been known to piss a few people off when I go to sports events and I say, you know what, guys, I really love myself a good tie. So you might find some of the thoughts about points and point system. If you have a more competitive edge to you, you might be thinking that this type of evaluation of points and point systems to be a little bit unnerving. We see a lot of jokes even about kids, the stories now that go about like, oh, every kid gets a trophy, that mindset is being blamed for our kids feeling unmotivated or unchallenged today. Oh, we got this society where every kid gets a trophy and it's just a big hoax, And, we can't have that kind of a society because we have to make sure that our kids feel challenged. So I hate to break it to whatever moron wanted to go with that thread of theory. The thing is that in the past 20 years, our kids have been through the AIDS epidemic, 9/11. Race wars, deprivation, school shootings, mass school shootings, dividing our politics into like major warfare and a whole world pandemic. This is just what our kids have been through in the last 20 years. So I don't think we really have to worry too much about challenging our children. I think that that's taken care of just fine. That we have been absolutely sufficient at challenging our children. The fear around keeping score is that our kids will turn out to be tree huggers and sensitive kids who will feel like fairness is expected, when in fact life is not very fair. But if that's the argument, I don't see the problem. Because maybe we need more tree huggers. Maybe we need more kids who expect that things should be fair, even if we have not yet to date figured out how to make that happen. So I've been thinking a lot about point systems and how we are immersed in these point systems and how we have these apps, everyone on our phones. We measure the number of steps that we take and the number of minutes that we meditate, and how to whether or not we won if we get the Wordly done. I don't know if you play Wordly, but my sisters and I love Wordly, and I'm always looking at like how fast did it take me. Weight Watchers, among other millions of programs, use a point system in regards to whether or not you're the right size. And we make a post on social media and we measure its value by how many likes it gets. And we go to games and we measure the scores, and our intellect of our children is measured by SAT scores, and our businesses and our content, it's all measured by the number of followers or friends or retweets or however, we decide to measure these things. Our bank accounts, our zip codes, our waistlines, all about numbers and point systems. And even here, I have to confess that we look at how many people show up to our Zoom conversations. And I'm pretty sure this whole point system is a sincere path to pain. And so I wanted to invite you to get off point with me, which as a writing coach is not something I would have thought I would hear myself say, to get off point. But honestly, I think we all need to take maybe a little break from the point system, or at least to back up a bit. Because no matter how many points you get or you don't get, they never really tell the full truth. They don't tell you what is good. They tell you what is currently valued by the most people. That doesn't tell you what's good. That tells you what's popular. And if we went by that frame of mind, we would say that Subway sandwiches and McDonald's were the best, but they're not. They're just the most popular. They're not the best. They're just easy to get to. No one is ever known to be said in the world like, gosh, I hope my last meal on earth is McDonald's. No offense to McDonald's or Subway, but, this is not the truth. The truth is not pointed. It's multifaceted. It's all-encompassing. It's inclusive. And when someone attempts to make a point, it doesn't mean that it will lead to truth. It only means that it's something to be considered. So consider this point. You don't need to accept it. Just consider it. You don't need to be threatened by someone else's point of view. Just consider it. And in this way, we might create a more considerate world. Letting in these points helps us. Being comfortable with looking at a lot of different points helps us to have a more holistic perspective of any topic, but it still doesn't guarantee the whole truth. The whole truth we get from going to God. The consideration of another person's point of view is what helps us to have a more expansive experience of ourselves and our world. But the whole truth we get by going to God. So making a point of having, making a point or having points or gathering up points can, for the most part, be a lot of busy work. And it doesn't always bring us closer to peace or to truth. The art of happiness, of success, is to attempt to see things from another's perspective. But in today's fractured world, it looks like we're all losing track of this art form. And even many arguments will begin with, what's your point? So last week we had Kathy Adams from Zen Parenting with us. Awesome. It was an amazing conversation, stirred up so much interesting things for me to think about. And then afterwards, my husband and I listened to Ezra Klein's podcast. It was on the culture of gaming. If you listen to him or if you haven't, it's a great podcast. It got me thinking about these point systems and how pervasive they are in our lives and what that means for us spiritually. So I was reminded, and I shared this last week, of this time when I think I was first inundated by the point system when I was a kid, and I hung out at the Jersey Shore, and we would walk the boardwalk, and we'd see people with these very large stuffed animals, and the bigger the better, because anybody who walked the boardwalk with these big stuffed animals was a winner, and I would just like want that so badly. Like that was the show of what made somebody a winner. And the only way to win a large stuffed animal was to give the guy, the carny, your money, and then to attempt to get a little hoop over the neck of a bottle, or to get a ball through a hole, not just once, but several times, and then you would win points. Now, no matter how much I practiced, I can say that the talent of getting a hoop over the neck of a bottle never ended up serving me anywhere else in my life. But for some reason, if you could do that one trick, you were a winner. So now what I know about point systems, from many point systems, is that points can poke you in the eye and blind you to the truth. In fact, they're just like the tip of the iceberg that peeks past the water. And these points are sometimes just hard and held beliefs that are not actually true at all. It's not true that if you get a hoop over the neck of a bottle, 3 times in a row, that you're going to succeed in life. So some points are just distracting precipices that are designed to make the rest of us feel like we're missing out on something. And they can be very successful. I'm not suggesting that we should all just strive for mediocrity, but there is something so joyful about just not knowing the score. Just dancing without knowing the time that you spent dancing, or just walking without wondering if you reached the number of points that will make you feel successful. Remember when we used to just walk? Remember when we used to just do that? Whenever we're doing something for a reaction or a score, we're not really doing it from a place of love. It's conditional. And it will make the giving and the giver feel very stressed out. And this scorekeeping is not coming from love. When we talk about energy, which we've been talking about, energy is the first cause. Energy is the scent, the seed of all that you do. If your energy is seeded in winning, it's going to feel contracted. If it's seeded in playing, it's going to feel expansive. I know it sounds kind of crazy to roll out in the world without including in the equation your own self-preservation, but only the separate think that they need to care for themselves. That's what the Course in Miracles teaches us, that only the separated thinks that I need to take care of myself. So are you doing whatever you're doing for points or for pleasure? And do you remember what brings you pleasure? I remember when I was a little kid in church, I remember the first time I heard this phrase, and it really rung a bell in me. I was with my mom, and she was thanking somebody in the church, this other woman, for something that the other woman had done. I don't remember what it was. But the other woman looked at my mother, and she placed her hand on her heart, and she said these words. She said to my mom, "Oh, my pleasure." And I was like, what? What does that mean, my pleasure? To see somebody say that as a converse to, like, instead of saying, not my pleasure, like, you owe me, I'm going to keep score, I'm going to get back to you, Joan, I'm going to figure out how you're going to make this up to me, it's completely different than, oh, my pleasure. And I actually saw in that moment that this woman had already been paid back, because the act that had brought her to this exchange had actually given her pleasure. That's kind of radical. A Course in Miracles is radical. A Course in Miracles takes it even further. It says, recognize what does not matter, and if your brother asks you to for something outrageous, tell him to go screw himself. It doesn't say that. It says, recognize what matters, and if your brother asks you for something outrageous, make sure you keep score so that you get paid back. It doesn't say that either. How many times can I trick you? It says, recognize what does not matter, and if your brother asks you for something outrageous, Do it because it doesn't matter. That's radical, isn't it? Do it because it doesn't matter. This is from the same book that tells us that a happy outcome is guaranteed, that it is God's good pleasure to bring us the kingdom. In lesson 102, it says, be happy, for your only function here is happiness, not winning, not gaining points. You have no need to be less loving to God's Son than he whose love created him as loving as himself. Besides these hourly 5 minutes for this practice, it says, rest frequently today to tell yourself that you have now accepted happiness as your only function, and to be sure that you are joining with God's will in doing so. So it's literally saying to us, get to know your pleasure. Get to know what brings you happiness. Do you remember what brings you happiness? Do you remember what brings you unconditional happiness? The thing that you do, that you would do in the dark in the middle of the night with nobody watching. For Tembray, I think that's singing. You can tell when somebody has tapped into what brings them happiness. For Mia Sarah, you see it with her ministries. I mean, you get to see, like, this is, so then we get all polluted and prostituted by, like, does this make me money? Does this bring me recognition? And we can start to, our gifts can start to be weighted down by conditions. And we just want to be awake to that. Lesson 71 says only God's plan for salvation will work. This lesson asks us to check in and really ask the ego-busting question, which is not, how am I going to make money out of this? Which, believe me, I know as an individual, as an entrepreneur, as a householder, like we ask these questions, but the questions, the script that's given to us through A Course in Miracles is, what will you have me do? What? Where will you have me go? What? What will you have me say and to whom? I don't got time for that, God. I got to figure out how I'm going to make a living. So God is invested in my happiness and has no interest in how many points I'm making. The point system wants us to forego our inner compass, and it wants us to chase after getting enough points to prove our worth. And we chart our progress through using these mass conscious metric systems that keep us feeling like we're winning or losing a game that's based on nothing real. And like those large stuffed animals, we invest heavily in winning something that we never really wanted to begin with. No, I never really wanted a large stuffed animal, as I confessed last week. And in fact, if you had asked me at that time in my life, like, I'm going to take you into the toy shop and you can have whatever you want, I wouldn't have chased a large stuffed animal. That was just a symbol that was being used for me to equate with lack of self-worth. Instead of asking, what is it you love, we go about, like, assessing people on this metric system of, like, well, how many points do you have? How many subscribers, how many followers, how many retweets, or whatever that is. We see parents even going batshit crazy with SAT scores and GPAs and class rankings, and gathering up these points give us this false sense of well-being, because even when we check out all of the boxes and gather all of the points, we don't necessarily have peace and happiness. We still seem to have some misery and anxiety. Because we've won points or not won points doesn't really matter. Because as we focus on winning or not winning, we end up losing ourselves. And we're hoodwinked into caring about trophies and not experiencing life. We pay a great cost for some of these things that we don't actually really value or want. And everyone is symbolically kind of walking around with these giant stuffed animals, and our kids are immersed in the calculation of their worth according to the points that have been accrued. Even the very young are placed in these experiences. I remember when my kids were small, we would go to Chuck E. Cheese. I don't know if you know about Chuck E. Cheese, but it is a absolute hotbed of hell. I mean, it's just like, oh my Lord, like what were we doing? No offense again to Chuck E. Cheese, but this is basically what it broke down to. It's this modern day Jersey City boardwalk thing. The kids would, they had 1,000 games, but none of them were to be played. They were all about gathering tickets. You had to get enough tickets. And these kids would turn into like maniacs. You'd get like 10,000 tickets, could buy the average kid. If you got 10,000 tickets, it would cost you about $30, to accrue all of these tickets. And then you would go to the token place and you would buy a prize that you could get at the dollar store, after all of this work. And it was sort of this grooming place for addictions, I felt. And if we look at society, at this point system, we've taken these kids, and as we become adults, we're using the same thing. You know, we're spending a lot of time at the crap table. The sales numbers, the likes that we get, the retweets, the followers are now the measure of success. But we don't play with game tokens. We play with time. Very valuable commodity. Time and focus. And ain't nobody got time for that. So it's no longer a pursuit of our dreams that bring us happiness, but the number of points attached to the pursuit of these dreams. And points become more important than our passion or our pursuit of happiness. And we add all these points up with these analytics, and we think that these analytics offer us, you know, truth. Like, oh my gosh, I did 10,000 steps. I'm a winner. I have been there. You know what I mean? So some of these point systems help us, but for the most part, they don't really mean too much. But they're helpful or about as helpful as getting like a triple lineup at the Vegas. You're given a hit of this dopamine, like, oh my God, I've leveled up. I now have 100 more followers, when we're actually not really going anywhere. We're actually playing these slot machines. And I just want you to take a look at that. And we're buying into these status symbols of cars and homes and designer bags and vacations and the illusion that they say something about us. These status symbols do not actually mean anything. They're just like those overpriced toys at Chuck E. Cheese. And I know that can kind of be like an unraveling of a huge societal blind spot, but it's probably good that we talk about the truth. Now, I understand that also these things can sound like blanket statements, and that scoring and point systems can reveal a certain level of basic information as to where the child's growth is or to where we might be, but it stopped being used as helpful in some ways, and it's starting to be used very harmfully. And now we have point systems to fast pace our assessment of each other. If you get this in this SATs, you mean this and this, and if you don't, you get this and this, and if you have this many followers, you're this and this, and if you're not, you're that and that. And it's not a kind or intimate way of being with a human being to judge them by their points. Wherever we have like a person or a business that we are connected to or attracted to, we want to also know, like, am I giving these likes, these points, from a place of like, I want them to like me, or I'm feeling guilty about not liking this, or whatever. It's an interesting conversation to stay conscious around. You may see this. You may see someone in your field even who has reached a great amount of points, and you may think they are so much smarter than me, and then you look at their content and it's for shit, and you go, oh, I got duped. They just have really good PR. They're just really good at playing the point system. That's it. We get played by the point system, and we play the point system every time we like or follow or use these metric systems for ourselves and declare something about ourselves through using these metric systems. So can we assess where we're striving for points or showing love, and maybe where we're also withholding love? The last point I want to make about the point system is that here's the thing. Even if you acquire a whole bunch of points to get yourself in a certain direction, the consciousness of the world is shifting so fast that by the time you think you get to the winning point, they change the rules, and that's no longer a winning point. Have you ever seen that happen? Here's a case in point. My husband is an English school teacher. He teaches the 5-paragraph essay. I'm a writer. I've written 3 books. I've written a musical, a one-person show, enough sermons to fill a small, novel. I have never in my life used the 5-paragraph essay. I've never used that. Today, my son Liam, he's on Twitter. He has 60,000 followers that he has gathered through witty little sound bites. There's no longer a need to have this structure of a 5-paragraph essay to reach this place of, authority. To be fair, the 5-paragraph essay is a form of communication, but it's only one of the many. And schools are focusing on it because the SATs and the advanced placement tests have a nice sort of neat 5-point grade system. Got to get the points. So they're teaching this thing that is obsolete. based on a point system that doesn't actually serve us. I think that's an interesting thing to consider. So we know what it looks like to follow points, but we also know what it looks like to follow our hearts. It's crazy to follow your heart, but we all have places where we get to decide on following one or the other. My husband and I both have second careers. We're in our second career. We followed the paths that we're in, him being a teacher, me being a spiritual leader, not because we thought this would be a great way to get points. But because it would make us happy. That's it. And it's worked out. We have happiness. But on the other hand, we do follow in some way the point system, and in that we chose to live where we live based on good schools, because we bought into the illusion that good schools would help our kids get more points, and because we based our decision on point system, we actually live in a place that's not completely aligned with our hearts. That's what it looks like. That's what it looks like here. You get to assess what it looks like in your house. And I share this with you because I want to invite you to take both points and passion into consideration when making decisions. One does not come at the exclusion of the other. And so I wanted to share this story with you about this guy. It's like I said in the beginning, that it's one of my favorite stories, and where he actually followed his heart and he won, but he also had the experience where everyone won, because he led from this passion and not from this acquisition of points. And I wonder if any of us are going to be brave enough to lean back this week and stop keeping score. Keeping score is something that you do to ensure that you won or to prove a point, right? But you've already won. You're already worthy. Hold that truth for yourself as you engage and entertain everything. So as you go about your life, if you're playing, if you're living, if you're eating, if you're engaging, if you're sharing, are you doing it for the sole purpose of joy? Because the point system will be the thing that distracts you from your joy. And the main idea is to play your part. So here's the story. In 1983, Australia hosted this ultra marathon. You probably heard the story before, because I do like to tell it. It's one of my favorites. It was a marathon that was 543 miles, and it went from Sydney to Melbourne, and it was this grueling course that would take at least 5 days to complete, and it drew world-class athletes, highly trained at the peak of their potential, and young bucks who were impeccable form, sponsored by large companies such as Nike. And at the same time, in 1983, this 61-year-old potato farmer named Cliff Young showed up at the start of the race. He was not backed by sponsors. He was not decked out in lycra or logos. He was wearing overalls and work boots, and he was intent on running this race. And it was foolish, because this couldn't happen. A 61-year-old potato farmer couldn't run an ultra marathon in overalls. And the press went crazy, and the race committee all said, you're crazy, Cliff Young, because there's no way you can finish this race, so we can't let you do this. You've not been appointed to this level of recognition. And, as we read the story and we hear the story, we just all love this good Davy and Goliath experience. So Cliff Young, he went on to sign up for the race. See, he had grown up on a farm where they couldn't afford horses or a tractor, and the whole time that he was growing up, whenever the storm would roll in, his job was to round up all the sheep, and they had something like 2,000 sheep on 2,000 acres, and sometimes Cliff Young would be, running for those sheep for 2 to 3 days. And so this is what he knew. Even when the world was saying no, he knew that this was something that actually brought him great joy. So when the race started, the pros, took off, and they left Cliff Young in the dust. But Cliff kept steady. Even when it appeared that he was not up for the job, he was kind of shuffling. And in fact, the media called it the Cliff Shuffle. And many of them feared that this old farmer was going to drop dead on the side of the road. And still, he just kept at this slow and odd pace. He was trailing the pack by a large margin at the end of the first day. But then something strange happened. While the other competitors stopped to sleep for the night, Cliff kept running. See, all the other professional athletes, they knew about how to score this game. They knew all of the rules and all the ways to win the points. And they knew that this was 5 days of a competitive race. And in order to truly compete, one had to run 18 hours a day and then sleep 6 remaining hours. The thing is, Cliff didn't know any of that. And when the morning of the second day came, not only was Cliff still in the race, he had continued running, jogging, shuffling all night. He didn't stop to sleep. He didn't know the rules. He was not keeping score. He just kept running because he loved to run. And each night he would get a little closer to the pack. And by the final night, he had taken the lead and was the first to cross the finish line. And he set a new world record that awarded him, the record breaker. And he also was given $10,000. And when given the money, he did something. All of those points, those 10,000 points, he did something that was even more shocking than winning the race. He didn't know that there was race money. He didn't know that this was connected to 10,000 points. So he felt kind of odd taking this money, and he said, I feel like everybody did a good job. He invoked this thing that we see in another culture called Ubuntu, where he took what he got and he shared it with the other racers. And this rocked the world. He took us past the rules and the regulations and the confines and the safety zones, and he made a sincere point in what love could do when you just do what love would have you do. Not based on trophies or acknowledgments, but just for the love of it. To see if we can experience life just for the love of it. That's the point. That's the whole point right there. And that's the word.
I love the word. So many points there that I could relate to. I have so much to say on this. I am sure this brought up a lot for everyone. So gather your questions. Now we're going to hear from Mari. She's going to share a bit about what's on our calendar.
Good morning and good day and good afternoon for those in Ireland. We would like to thank everyone who supports our community. Your financial gifts allow us to continue offering free events all throughout the week. We are a non-for-profit community, and we do have free virtual events, all possible through your generous donations. You will see a link in the chat that will allow you to just go within and connect to sharing your gifts with us and just see what is yours to give. You can just connect with that. Otherwise, you can go to our website, speakeasyspiritualcommunity.com, and there you will find a link as well to place any donations that are put in your heart to share with us. Today, we start part of our weekly events. We have at 3 p.m. Central Time, we have Culture Club. At 7 p.m. on Tuesday, we have Death Cafe. And in Death Cafe, if there's anything that you're grieving and you need some support, just join us. All virtual, all on Zoom. And Saturday, we will have the Mary Magdalena Meditation Circle at 1 p.m. Central. And speaking of meditations, we are continuing our 8:18 p.m. Central prayer and meditation. We have a wonderful group of teachers who have volunteered to host this. This space will be open for you to come in and pray and meditate. However, if anybody is interested in leading that time, just stay after service, stay on the Zoom, and we can chat or put your information in the chat for me, and we can have you lead one of those evenings. So thank you so much, and I pass it back to you.
Thank you. And our conversation begins. So I know, Maureen, when you were talking, I just kept thinking about all the times that people were giving with strings attached. and how like initially it seems so wonderful. And then it's like, oh, feeling that agenda behind it all, the whole giving to get, really just giving because it's my pleasure,
Mm,
is a completely different experience.
yeah.
Yeah. So I see Amber has her hand up.
Amber. I love Amber. Amber is one of our tapping teachers in the morning, and she is also conscious eating. You should put your link up, Amber, because Amber is awesome.
Thank
But
you.
yeah, you're really grateful that you're in our community and that you are so generous that you give from your heart. Thank you, thank you. What's your question or your comment? Gorgeous.
Well, thank you for this community because it probably pushes me out of my comfort zone a lot more than I would have normally. So this is a safe container for teaching. So if anyone else has something to teach, I highly recommend it here. But I had one other point, and then Beth talked, and then I had another point. And so um, when Beth said, "Oh, giving, with strings attached," like I've received a lot of gifts with strings attached, and at the beginning, I just didn't know. And then after a while, I started to be wary of taking gifts, and so I think I don't know what to say about that, but like I don't want to be wary of receiving, and I don't know. So I'm sure there's someone else that can maybe touch on that. And then
Well,
I
yeah, you know what you could do? I mean, I have had experiences where I was not sure if it was unconditional, and so I claimed it to be so.
yeah.
Meaning, like a friend of mine said to me, I'm going to take you to Russia. And I was like, I hope there's no strings attached. So I said to him, I will never pay you back. And I've been good to my word. This is not a conditional gift if I accept it from you. So, what would happen if we just said that? Thank you. I accept this without conditions.
Yeah, yeah. I like that. Um, and then another one I had when you were saying, like, figure out what you actually value. So my fiance is starting a business, and so now I'm the one making the money and supporting us. And I was telling close friends, like him starting this, and then another friend, out of concern of her heart, told me, are you sure you should be doing this? I did this with my husband. It was a bad experience. And then, we didn't have money. And then you're the one providing all this stuff. And then I started thinking, I'm like, gosh, this is kind of a bad situation, isn't it? And so then I brought it up to Kyle, and then I made him feel guilty about something that we'd already worked through. And it was just like, why did I bring this up? Now we're starting back at square one, trying to be comfortable in the situation.
Yeah.
And then I just realized, I'm like, I don't value money the way that she does. And it was helpful for me to realize I'd rather him be happy. I'd rather me be happy. I don't need a big bank account to be happy. And that is not my value. And then when I resettled that and finally, like, I'm still like picking up the pieces from that trust I shattered by bringing in someone else's worries into our relationship. So that's kind of what I wanted to
Yeah.
say.
That's a really great point. And listen, like we're all on the spectrum of healed or unhealed in regards to your money and my money. I watched that Irish film the other night that's up for an award. And in it, they have this saying, which I totally have lived by for many years, not at my benefit, which is my husband will attest to, which is what's yours is mine, and what's mine is mine. I swear to God, that's how I rolled. If my husband had money, it was our money, and if I made money on my own, I was like, this is my money. You know what I mean? And so in a relationship, this is where we get to work that out. We don't come knowing stuff. The relationship is a classroom to help us to learn. And so we're going to step on each other's toes because that's what the relationship is for. It's for teaching us about things we didn't know prior to coming into the relationship. And we do learn through pain sometimes, and that's okay, because it's when we learn that way, we go, I don't want to repeat that. And there's probably more even to have a conversation around. Like there's probably even more for us to know about that. But, it's totally forgivable because your spirit is evolving. That's it. My husband wants to share something. I wonder if he's going to throw me under the bus.
Well, it's not that I couldn't, but no, this has nothing to do with throwing you under the bus. So I'm a school teacher. I'm a public school teacher. We have to be recertified or something every 5 years. And in order to do that, you need a certain number of professional development units. And I had some sort of teacher improvement day last Friday, and they sent me an email reminding me to update my, input my units into the Illinois State Board of Education. So I was doing that, and as I was doing that, I noticed that I need 120 hours of professional development every 5 years in order to be recertified, and I had 0. And I was like, oh my God. And this is from 2018 to 2023. So I have about a year left to figure this out. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know. I just dropped the ball. I guess I stopped doing that. So I sent out an email to my colleagues. It's like, hey, does anybody remember all of the professional development that we've done for the past 4 years? And it turns out, yes, every single one of my colleagues got back to me, and I'm the idiot that didn't know how it worked. And long story short, my problem is solved, and I updated my units, and I'm fine. But it just sort of fit into the narrative, I thought, of Maureen's message of points. These, I hate to be this way, but these professional development units mean nothing to me personally as a teacher. That does not make me a good or a bad teacher. My students actually are what I value. And I ask for their feedback every semester. And they give me, in some cases, remarkably unfiltered feedback on what I do well and what I don't do well. And that's what I care about. And I got to be honest, at my school, we have over 400 teachers, and I've been chosen to be the most effective teacher 3 years in a row. And that means the world to me. I don't know that it's deserved, but that's what I care about. These stupid professional development units mean nothing to me. I have to do it. I have to go through the system. I have to upload my credentials. But I feel like that's in alignment with what Maureen is saying. I value the impact on my students, and but the points are the points, and sometimes we have to play the game, but they can be distracting, and they can be sort of silly.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because, I was a spiritual practitioner through Science of Mind for many years. But the criteria was that I needed to host my license at a church to which I was owed hours of service, like you were an indentured servant. And I was like, I didn't come here to help you build a church. I came here to help people. And the point system actually, made it really hard for me just to do the thing I wanted to do, to the point where I was like, screw this, I don't need a license. And I let my license go after 10 years because I didn't want to be beholden to the like twisted system that didn't really assess the work I was doing in the world. Took no account into the work that I was actually doing in the world.
One of the things that's coming up for me in this conversation, first of all, I really hear your heart, Will, in what you're saying. Like it's very refreshing to hear a teacher of our kids, the next generation, really have his heart into it. Like, thank you for all of us, like, to be a shining example of that. And sometimes those points, like the continuing education points, they're just a doorway to get into the arena where you can share your heart. Because without that license, you don't get to play in that arena. But if you look at it as a doorway, not as like, that's the thing that validates me, then there can be something of value there of like, I get to go into this arena now and share what I love. That's just what came up for me.
And I will also say that form follows consciousness. So if you're supposed to have those boxes checked, that you will be guided when to do that without stress. And so immediately when Will was like, I don't know how to deal with these freaking boxes, like, hello, help, like he was barraged with people who were like, we got you. And that's a beautiful thing to know about your consciousness, you know? So Joni wanted to share a question, and then Sinead.
And Sinead. Yeah, thanks, Will.
And I want to add to that. What a great example of what we give meaningful. So thank you, Beth, for reframing and sharing that. And I've never personally experienced a classroom with Will, but I do have a memory of watching his class students interact in gratitude with him on a video. And I can tell you that I will never forget that, because I felt the love that your students had for you. And my dogs are barking, but I just thought I would say that that's all I know about you, is the way your students shared love in that video. So thanks.
Thanks,
love
Joni.
that video too. It's gorgeous. Thank you. Okay.
Hi, Sinead. How you doing?
I'm doing good, thank you. And thank you so much for such a lovely talk. And it was just amazing. And what came to me in the middle of it was that when we stop keeping score, stop keeping points, then the freedom that comes in giving, you know, because then you're given from a place that equally brings you as much joy as the person that you might be giving something to. And so that really kind of made me think about, yeah, where are the places in my life that, you know, I give freely, and where are the places then that I feel like maybe I'm holding back, and that there's this, you know, there's a lack, or you feel like you're missing out. And as you were doing your talk, this story came to me that the other day I was in the supermarket and there was a little kid there, and I was sharing this on our morning call. So in Ireland, you've got to put a €2 coin in to get your trolley out. So I was bringing my trolley back, and I happened to meet this little one who was probably about 6 in the supermarket, and we were just chatting about school because she had to go to school the following day. I didn't know her now from anybody, but as I was coming back to put back my trolley, she was there with her mum. They were waiting for a lift with their shopping, and I took the €2 out, and just this thing came over me to just go over to her. So I just walked over to her and said, you know, can I give you this €2? And her mum said, oh my God, thank you so much. And she said, absolutely, yeah. She was delighted. And as I was walking away, the little one was counting some like pennies or 1 cent. And I could hear her as I walked away, and she just said to her mum, I have enough money now. She said, can I please go back into the shop and get, so she obviously was looking for something, but she didn't have enough money, and her mum didn't have enough money to get her what she needed. And I just walked away with tears in my eyes and just such this gratitude in my heart that when we give without ever worrying about, you know, what we're going to get back, and that the joy we get is far more than what we're going to be at a lot, to think that we would lose something. So that just came to me when you were doing your talk about, like, when we stop counting the points and the point system, then, you know, we kind of get to be in that joy. And I'm similar to Will in that I work in social work, and so I have to keep all this accreditation and hours and things like that. And yeah, it drives me mad, and I go, oh my God, I can't believe why I'm doing this. But I just say, oh, I have to do this, because then it allows me to experience the joy of all the young teenagers I work with and the young people I get to spend my day working with. So yeah, when we can look at it in a different way, it brings us as much joy in the giving as it is in the receiving.
I love that story so much. I love that little kid has the consciousness to draw you in and help you finance her favor. I just love that.
They must have been, I think they were waiting for a lift or something, because she was like, her mum was like, go quickly then. And she's like, because I have enough money before their taxi came.
God, that's good stuff. Thank you.
So thank you for your lovely.
Thank you, Sinead. Sean.
We needed to be. Like, the universe is just like provides the perfect classrooms that have nothing to do with our sight or our fear. Like, there's things that happen for you, like people giving you 2 top-ins when you most needed them, that like are not in the plan. They're outside of the grand plan. So we don't always calculate those miracles in our game plan, but they're there. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Mia wanted to share something. Hi, Mia.
Hey,
Hi.
a little bit around, I suppose there's two things, but one is around, we have a similar point system here. Well, I don't know if it's similar, but we have a point system in secondary school in order to go to university. And, you know, it goes up as far as 600 points, and anywhere between 300 and 600, you have some chance of a third level education. And my youngest daughter has been one of my greatest teachers. Like from day one, I hated school. And, you know, she got to, I think, fourth year in, well, junior cert year anyway. And somewhere during that summer break, the Holy Spirit just literally spoke to me and said, she doesn't have to keep going to school. Like literally it was this voice going, she doesn't have to stay in this system. And so I said to her, there was a year after that called transition year. And I kind of thought, well, that transitions you into real life. And I said to her, and I can feel the gladness in my heart right now. I actually just went and said to her, you know what? I was just thinking, how about you just do transition year and finish school? And I just remember her glee. She was like, what? Seriously? Seriously? Are you for real, Mom? Are you for real? You know, and the excitement. And I was like, yeah, you just got to find something that you're going to do that you're passionate about. And she said, that's easy. I just want to be an actor. And at 17, you know, she went off to Glasgow and went to acting school. And now she's, you know, she does a little bit of acting, but recently she said to me, she's a barista and she's in Manchester. And recently she said, oh my God, I just so love making coffee for people. Like that's all I ever want to do is make coffee. Like even if I spill like 2 liters of milk a day. And I was like, what? And she's like, mild dyspraxia. And she said, yeah, seriously, I spill at least 2 liters of milk a day. Like she said, most days.
It's her pleasure.
It's like she is living her best life. Like she's just a joy. And she's so happy. And it all came from listening to that and not giving a shit about the points or the point system or what it was going to look like or what people were going to have to say.
Yes.
You know, it was so freeing for both of us and for the whole family, because to be honest, every morning was a nightmare, like trying to get her out to school.
Yeah. It's so interesting because it reminds me that we are each on course for our life's appointments, and that they will come in chapters and in, you know, buckets and in thimbles, and they will shift and change, you know. So the catalyst was that she wanted to be an actor, but then it actually brought her to this barista, and it doesn't make sense in the logical mind. But I remember, and I was sharing this with my son last night, that when I went into the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, like it was very prestigious, and if you got invited to study there for 2 years, it was like you took that. But when I went there, everybody that went there had a lot of money, and their parents were bankrolling them, and they were like living in the city, and I was like in New Jersey waitressing. And so I didn't even ask if I was invited back. I didn't even go back for my grades, because they told me if you get accepted into this program, you will not be able to work as an actor professionally. And I knew in that moment that even though the point system seemed so sexy and like everybody wanted that, that I didn't come to New York to be a student. I came to be an actor. And I had to actually let go of the golden ring of, like, you know, a status, and actually cut my own path. And I had a moment after being an actor for a long time, which I love about your daughter, which is like, I got to the point where even that, I was like, okay, I'm done and I'm full and I'm no longer enjoy with this, but I'm doing it only because this is the only thing I know. And right now, I would love if somebody hired me just to make coffee at a coffee shop where only serving coffee. Like that was literally my dream. I just wanted to be in a coffee shop where the only thing on the menu was coffee and I could just serve coffee. I swear to God, that was my dream. So it's interesting that like, we sort of judge these different dreams as like even in hierarchies of what's appropriate and what's fancy and what's not fancy, and we have no fucking idea.
Yeah. And just the other point I wanted to make, you know, for me, like not equating that to finance, because, you know, let's face it, we know it's not like bringing in piles and piles of money or anything like that. But you forget when you're doing something, you know, that there, when you're giving like that, that, you know, something's going to come back. And I got an email the other day, and I don't know if Donna's on the call, but, and again, you know, just to get an email that actually recognizes the love that you're putting out, or you being you, actually, because it's simply that, it's you being you and allowing spirit to use you, and to have that acknowledged and recognized was worth, it's, you know, weight in gold, literally. And that's the joy of just anchoring down and just doing, being, you know, joining the ocean and moving out and moving back in and moving out and just being, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm truly grateful, and I'm truly grateful, you know, to you and Bella and this community for, you know, being the catalyst, I guess, for me stepping into that. So thank you.
It's so funny to think like today's conversation is like the highlights were like 2 cents and a love note, is like, that is really, you know what I mean? Like 2 cents and a love note, and I'm yours. That doesn't take much. And it means everything. So thanks for sharing that, Mia.